George Kittle has been a really big part of this offense, really with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's been fighting injury for the last couple of years, and this beginning of the season, he hasn't played in week 1. We don't know if he'll be in week 2. Some people say he could be in week 2. They could wait until week 3 to unleash him. What's going on with George Kittle? Is this injury a significant injury? When he comes back, is he going to be fighting injury all season with some of these nicks and knacks that he has over the last couple of years? Or do you believe that after he comes back from this injury, it'll be smooth sailing throughout the season?
So he was dealing with a groin injury, and I think those are always tricky because those are ones that can be re-aggravated very easily, and especially when you have somebody who plays as physical as George Kittle does on every single play. You hear a lot of those cliches about people giving 110% and always putting their best effort forward. George Kittle is the embodiment of that. He is somebody, the 49ers could be down 30 points, and he's still going to give you everything he has on a given rep, whether it's a run blocking assignment, whether it's him working on a 5-yard out route and picking up 6 or 7 yards after the catch. He is somebody that plays at 100 miles an hour at all times. You guys are familiar with the all gas, no brakes saying that Robert Saleh loves throwing around. Yes. George Kittle is he definitely subscribed to that, and I think that it's just kind of the price that it's what comes with the pros of George Kittle is the cons of at a certain point that's going to catch up to him, and he probably will miss a game or two. I think it's very similar to kind of how it was with Rob Gronkowski for a number of years, where you knew you were going to get a dynamic player when he was on the field, but the way he played the game left him more susceptible to injuries. And I think Kittle's the kind of player where he's only going to be held out. It really is serious, and it is a situation where they're concerned about re-aggravating it. I know that Kyle Shanahan stated that Kittle wanted to play this past weekend in Chicago, but they made a decision to rule him out rather early because they didn't want to risk it. And I think that's the right thing to do at this point. Obviously, they ended up losing, and losses in September count the same as they do in December. But with so much of the season ahead, you can't afford to lose a guy like Kittle long term. And I think the closer that the 49ers get to feeling comfortable that he's, maybe 75, 80%, they'll allow him to go back out there. I don't think it's going to be a situation where they wait for him to get back to 100% because, again, the way he plays the sport, I don't know if the guy's ever at 100%, but he's going to go out and give you that 100% effort regardless of where he's at from a health standpoint. So I would expect to see him in the next couple of weeks, barring any major setbacks. But I think it's just it's a precautionary thing at this point because those injuries are so tricky, especially when it comes to the groin and soft tissue stuff.
So I want to go back to week 1. Obviously, a lot of people were, I think 95% of people thought they were going to beat the Bears in week 1, and the Bears pull off the upset, probably the biggest upset of week 1. I think one of the things that has hurt Kyle Shanahan, as good as a coach as I think he is sometimes they've played down to teams. We saw them get swept by Seattle last year. Even in their Super Bowl year, they lost against Atlanta. Like teams that aren't that good, they play down to sometimes. Have you seen that kind of thing in your time covering the 49ers?
I don't think it's necessarily a playing down scenario because you're right. There is a pattern of them losing to teams that on paper they shouldn't be losing to. And to me, any given Sunday, I subscribe to that. That's one of the beauties of the NFL is that every team has a shot on a given day. But the problem is that I feel like they come in maybe a little bit undisciplined against some of those teams, and they start committing mistakes that you can't get away with against a top-tier team, and maybe you're not as disciplined against a team like the Bears because you think you're so overmatched from a talent standpoint, or so you overmatch them so much from a talent standpoint that, hey, we can have a couple false starts or a couple defensive penalties that, extend drives. We'll make it up. It doesn't matter. In the full 60 minutes, we're still going to come away with a win. That, to me, is what ultimately cost them this game. They had 12 penalties for 99 yards, and they had a couple that were just absolutely back-breaking. They're up 10-0. The Bears' offense hadn't gotten anything going. I'm pretty sure they had 3 net passing yards halfway through the third quarter.
Wow.
And then they tried running the ball on 3rd and 4, and the 49ers had this play pretty much wrapped up at the line of scrimmage. They had 3 or 4 defenders around the ball carrier, and linebacker Dre Greenlaw reached his hand in trying to assist with the tackle, and he accidentally grabbed a bit of the ball carrier's face mask. So that gives the Bears an automatic first down, and 3 plays later, Dante Pettis gets free on a broken play. All of a sudden, it's 10-7, and you have this huge momentum shift where you're going from getting the ball back up 10, and the Bears offense hasn't had anything going, and they're the ones who are going to be coming back from a double-digit deficit when that rain starts coming down. And now you're looking at a situation where you've controlled this entire game, you're only up 3, and then they continue to make a couple more mistakes. This snowball effect where once they started committing these egregious penalties and having a couple sloppy plays on offense, it just turned into a mess that they couldn't, climb their way out of it by the time the clock hits 0.
We are talking SB Nation, Niners Nation staff writer Jordan Elliott. Jordan, the Niners defense is one of the elite defenses in the NFL, especially the front seven. They have beasts of men. They don't play like boys. They're men. Nick Bosa, when healthy, he's one of the best pass rushers in the league. He causes so much mischief on that other side of the line. But there are other guys that really stand out defensively, Drake Jackson, all these different guys that we talk about over the last couple of years. Where is this defense right now? Is this defense one of the elite defenses this year? Do you believe that this defense is going to show up week in and week out? I mean, I know they played Chicago, and Chicago did win, but their defense played very, very well, even in the rain. Is this team really known this year for their defense? Or are they expecting this offense to be the offense to really step up and be the elite part of this team moving forward?
I think it all starts with the defense, and it starts specifically with the defensive line and that front seven you were talking about. They have a really talented trio of linebackers. I personally think Fred Warner is the most valuable linebacker in the league because of the way he's able to cover. He is so good against the run and does all the traditional things a linebacker does in the box, but his ability to cover like a defensive back and not only pick up tight ends and running backs, but run with opposing teams' number one receivers, pick up guys out of the slot. He's incredible. The defensive line is just stacked across the board. You have guys like Samson Ebukam, Eric Armstead, who get overshadowed by the Nick Bosas of the world, and they're phenomenal players in their own right, but they just have so many good players. If you're not following them on a daily basis and seeing them week in and week out, it's easy to kind of get lost in the fold of things. The biggest change for this year, though, is that I think they have a true number one corner for the first time since they kind of brought in Richard Sherman, even though he was kind of on the downslope of his career on the back nine there. I think that having a corner like Travarius Ward has really changed things for them because Emmanuel Mosley is a very solid number two corner, but the way that Travarius Ward has been able to travel with opposing teams' number ones,
right.
Also lock up the 49ers zone number ones. They have a couple very talented receivers themselves. Some of the best training camp battles were Travarius Ward and Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. Doing that has allowed DeMeco Ryans to get a little bit more creative with some of the looks he's throwing out there. They can send pressure a little bit more. They can play a little bit more man coverage. So this defense is top 5 for the last 3 seasons, and I think this is the most talented group on paper that they've had out of the 3. So it'll remain, to be seen if they finish top 5 again. But just based on talent top to bottom and the things that they're able to do from a schematic standpoint, I think this is the best unit that they've had, which, again, says a lot when you've ranked as high as they have the last 3 seasons.
Well, that's how you're able to safely let go of D Ford's bad contract, who still hasn't even been signed yet by another team. Get all the pass rush depth. So from a schematic standpoint, the creativity of the defense, the Niners are one of the lowest in terms of blitz rate, both when Robert Saleh was there and now last year even too with DeMeco Ryans too. But we've also seen moments in playoff games too where they trust their pass rush too much because they don't want to blitz and they're reluctant to. Can you see that kind of thing changing? Not necessarily with Warner, but maybe even some of their other linebackers, maybe coming on the rush or even the corners?
I think that there was a bit of an adjustment. So as you mentioned last year, I thought it was extremely interesting because Ryans did blitz, but some of the times he did dial them up were in the biggest moments. In Green Bay, there was a blitz where they were down 7. It was right before that blocked punt that they had that got them back in that game against Green Bay, where they dialed up a blitz on 3rd and long, where that was not a tendency they had. I imagine Green Bay's offensive staff and Aaron Rodgers, when they're doing their game planning all week, that was not a look they expected. They did the same thing on 4th and I want to say it was like 4th and 2 or 4th and 1 in that Dallas game on that ball where Dak just missed connecting with Cedric Wilson downfield, but they sent a 0 blitz in that moment. So they don't do it very often, but DeMeco Ryans has shown that he has the trust in his players in big moments and big spots to dial up those pressures, and I expect that to increase exponentially this year, having more faith in the cornerback position, because you got to think last year it was really rough. They lost Jason Verrett, who was going to be their number 1 corner. They lost him week 1. Emmanuel Mosley was out for a majority of the season, so they had to sign guys like Josh Norman and Dre Kirkpatrick and start rookies like Diamador Lenore and Ambry Thomas, and they still finished with a top 5 defense. So I think now that you have 2 corners that you can trust that are there and that are healthy, I think that you'll see a lot more willingness for DeMeco Ryans to get a little bit more creative, the pressures and the blitzes that he's calling.